And speaking of deadlines, there are just a few days left before Congress heads home for a late summer recess, but the immigration crisis continues at the southern border and now in states in our nation's interior. Places like Nebraska are now housing illegal immigrants as the overflow across the border continues. And you may have seen the protests in Boston as well. Meantime, the president says he's not going to wait on Congress. More on that in a second. The White House is now prepping another round of executive orders. This time the objective would be to document the undocumented and give out millions of work permits to the people currently living here illegally. The details are still a little secret at this point, and you can understand why. Very controversial. Congress has pretty much completely rejected the president's request for $3.7 billion in emergency funding for the border crisis. Both parties say the request is too expensive by hundreds of millions of dollars. Obama said since Congress hasn't acted on the immigration reform bill or the most recent spending request, he would use his executive power to perhaps fix the problem.
And now, as for the VA scandal, it looks like we had a breakthrough over the weekend. The chairman of the House and Senate Veterans Affairs Committees have reached a tentative agreement. Both chairmen say the compromise will still make the VA more accountable. Plus, it'll give billions of emergency spending on at least 27 clinics, more specifically on those backlogs. The bill should also help the healthcare system recruit more doctors and other healthcare professionals. In addition, this new plan gives veterans more options to go outside the VA if they need a workaround. And earlier this morning, the United Nations Security Council had an emergency meeting demanding Israel and Hamas to take on action.
For an immediate and unconditional humanitarian ceasefire.
Well, the pressure for a ceasefire followed attacks launched by Israel and Hamas on Sunday, despite going back and forth over proposals for another temporary halt to nearly 3 weeks of fighting.
And today the Muslim world marks the end of Ramadan, but there's no festive spirit for hundreds of displaced Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. The top priority on this day is finding refuge at a United Nations school to escape the heavy fighting between Israel and Hamas militants.
And as Palestinians flee for their lives, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu continues to heap blame on Hamas for killing and sheltering terrorists.
Well, first of all, Hamas is responsible for the deaths of civilians. We're not targeting a single civilian. We're responding to Hamas action, and we're telling the civilians to leave. Hamas is telling them to stay. Why is it telling them to stay? Because it wants to pile up their own dead bodies. They not only want to kill our people, they want to sacrifice their own people.
Well, that was Netanyahu appearing on NBC's Meet the Press. He also said that schools in Gaza are used to target the Israeli army, and that's why a UN school was hit. He added the devastation may have come from Hamas fire.
And the Hamas militants are now turning to communist North Korea for weapons. They're asking for missiles and communication equipment to continue the war against Israel. Hamas has already made an initial cash down payment to set the deal. According to the Telegraph, Israeli military commanders believe North Korea experts gave Hamas advice on how to build tunnels in Gaza. The tunnels allowed the militants to move their weapons undetected.
Meanwhile, over on CNN, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, also former First Lady there, expressing her concerns with Russia's President Vladimir Putin in the relations with the U.S. and that nation.
Putin attacked me personally because he is very worried about any kind of internal dissent. So he wanted to clamp down on any opposition within Russia, and he wanted to provide more influence and even intimidation on his borders.
Well, Clinton added that the U.S. and Europe were hoping for the best from Putin as he returned to president, but due to his actions, he quickly disabled those hopes.
Well, John.